This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everybody. As I said, I'm Phyllis and I'm facilitating in the place of Nancy today because of her power difficulties. I'm going to read the motto and the land acknowledgement, then I'll go over the rules of engagement. I'll have everybody introduce themselves and then we'll get started on our discussion. So, Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace. The cat keeps trying to bite this thing, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communications to show that we are committed to treating all human beings with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Erace is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We come with the intention to listen, learn, and not to argue. This is the land acknowledgement. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our meeting group today are on the lands of the Chitimaca and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Tonkawan, Lipan Apache and Comanche in Austin, the Lenape and Piscataway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, the Cahuilla and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are all still on Indigenous land and it will always be Indigenous land. So as most people here know, the way we do our meetings is there's a list of people who, by raising one finger, indicate they want to be on the list. And then if the speaker who has said something that you don't understand, not that you don't agree with, but you didn't understand a word or a term or a concept, then you put up two fingers and I'll let you jump in and ask the question. If it is not a simply put clarifying question, we'll ask you to get on the list. Everyone who gets on the list has 2 minutes to speak, and Louise is going to keep time for me today. And close to the end, however much time we need to do it to wrap up by 11:30, we will have the final wrap up. Anybody who hasn't spoken will have 2 minutes, and everybody else will have 1 minute. If there is any crosstalk or any inappropriate things stated, I will say point of order, and then all speaking will finish. We'll stop immediately. And also during the wrap up, if you don't want to say anything, you're welcome to just say pass. We ask that you do stay muted throughout the discussion unless you're called on to speak. And the topic today, which I don't even have in front of me because I didn't know until about 9 o'clock that I was going to be doing this, is about this court system. They're trying to make it very white supremacist in Mississippi. I've only read the article once, to be honest, and I'm just going to open the list, trusting that you all have a lot to say. So who would like to start the list?
Should we introduce ourselves?
What a good idea. Yes. Okay. I always forget something. Dee Dee.
Good morning. I'm Dee Dee. It's 8:15 here, and I'm wide awake because I really wanted to be at this meeting. So I set my alarm, and I overslept last week, which is why I say that. And this article is shocking, and so I really wanted to hear everybody else's feedback on this.
Okay, thank you. Stanton?
Good morning, Stanton and Austin. Been coming for about a year now, and As I told Phyllis and a couple of people earlier, I may have to abruptly leave the meeting for a tree trimming estimate for my ice storm damage from last week. So I apologize in advance if that happens, or you may be stuck with me the whole time. All right, thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bill?
And we want to be stuck with you. So we value, at least I value your input. I'm Bill Ives, and I've been coming to Erace since 3 or 4 years before the pandemic. We were meeting in person. I have a cold, and if I feel a coughing spasm coming on, I'll probably not speak as much, but right now it's okay.
Thank you. Louise?
Louise, been coming on and off a couple of decades, and glad to be here.
And you can stay unmuted since you're the timekeeper. Cindy?
Yeah, and let me know when we do the first timing if you can hear it or not, please.
Okay, will do. Cindy?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cindy Morse, retired teacher, enjoying my retirement. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Marion?
Good morning again, everyone. I'm Marion here in New Orleans. Last night, there were about 15 people here at my house because it was my turn to host the dinner and the card party. So my granddaughter cleaned up the kitchen, but if I sound kind of incoherent, I didn't go to bed until midnight. We had a good time though. So it's good to see everybody. I've been coming to Erace discussion since 1993. And I'm looking forward to this morning's discussion.
Thank you, Marion. Marva?
Good morning. I'm Marva. Have a speech impediment post-COVID over 2 years ago. And I'm glad to be here for this Saturday's discussion. I'm located in New Orleans. I've been coming to Erace post-Katrina. Thank you.
Thanks, Marva. Marla?
Good morning. My name is Marla. I've been coming to Erace for a few years now, and also in the New Orleans area. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Leonetta?
Good morning, everybody. I hope I stay visible to everybody. I'm in New Orleans, and I've been a member of the Erace since my undergrad doing an internship with you. Look like I didn't jump. Let's see how long this gonna last.
Okay. Thanks, Leonetta. Glenn?
Peace be unto everyone. Glenn Abdullah, been a member of Erace since '94. Looking forward to this morning's discussion.
Thank you. And Greer?
My name is Greer. Y'all can call me Gigi because that's what's up there. I've been coming to Erace since like 2007, post-Katrina. And I really enjoy the conversations. Again, we don't have to agree on things, but it's always good to get a different aspect on how someone thinks about something other than the way you do. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you. So for those who came in after I said Nancy was going to facilitate today, but she asked me to do it because she is having electrical difficulties at her house. So I am now going to open the list for discussion. Anybody want to start us off? Oh, Bill Stanton. Anybody else? Okay, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I was appalled at the article, but I was not surprised. Mississippi, the folks in Mississippi have found another way to disenfranchise African Americans. It's instead of voting for the judges, which they normally do, they took away the vote of Black people and decided that it was white politicians were going to make better choices, which I find is disgusting. But it's not the first time it happened. In Michigan, the state legislature took away the governor authority of many Black majority towns. And for similar reasons, they thought the white politicians at the state level would run the town smarter. But actually, that was an overt message, but they wanted to cut funding to the towns. They had already cut the funding to the towns. So the towns had poor services, which justified takeover by the white politicians, which led to the Flint water crisis, among many other things. So this is an atrocity, but it's not the first time it's happened. It's a new version of Jim Crow. Take away the votes by taking away the positions that are voted on, and let white people make the choices of the voters.
We hear that. That's good. Thank you, Bill. Stanton, you're next.
Yeah, this just made me realize that, this is sort of like a microcosm of the bigger problem with the way the country is being governed. And that is through redistricting and other kinds of methods that people who want to hang on to power have figured out how to hang on to power. And even just in the news this week, what's happening with that criminal justice reform that's happening in Washington, D.C., where the Republican control of the House now has voted against the reforms that City Council of D.C. wanted to make. And so there are all kinds of levels of denial of power by people who are not the majority anymore, that the country is not in the same direction generally as some of these yahoos who got into power and stay in power through redistricting and through other nefarious means of carving up a city like Austin into 6 congressional districts when Austin's a pretty liberal-leaning Democratic city. And so we wind up having 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat who represent the city of Austin. It's just insanity with the way we conduct ourselves politically. So the microcosm of Mississippi trying to negate people's rights and take away the ability for Black voters to have a voice. It's a small part of what's happening nationally, and it's just all very scary, to be honest with you, that the minority can control the majority this way.
Thank you, Stanton. It was hard to hear you at the end. Your voice was very faint.
Yeah, it sounded muffled.
Yeah, I don't know if you're having. That was
no,
good.
Could be my throat. I don't know.
Okay.
No.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
That's all right. Greer is next and the list is open after her. Marion, Greer, go ahead.
Okay. We pay taxes and we're supposed to vote on things. And this is a sort of a form of taxation without representation. You're going to appoint people that the people don't choose. And my biggest problem with this is, where are the Democrats? Where are they? I mean, I heard about this here and there, but this should have been a talking point on every
news channel. I mean, seriously. And it wasn't. Democrats don't do their jobs. Even during civil rights, when Democrats controlled things, they did not do things to benefit us as Black people. And we still vote Democrat. And I'm not saying vote Republican, but a two-party system is not working for us on any level. It's going to take the people to do something about this. I'm thinking Mississippians should sue. They need to take this to the Supreme Court because this is definitely unconstitutional. We're moving backwards in time. We're not going forward. Like Stanton said, I mean, me and Stanton don't agree on a lot of things, but he's right. He's 100% right with what he said. We are regressing rather than getting better. And people are standing there watching this happen. We're living in a time when now right is wrong and wrong is right. And to speak out against it differently, you become a pariah. We have to be very careful. Things are going to slowly change to where our movements, what we have access to, the people who are supposed to be our representation, I'm gonna be honest, they aren't doing their jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Marion, then Dee Dee, then Lynetta. Anybody else? Oh, clarifying question from Bill.
Gene Greer, you made excellent points. Do you think the Republican Supreme Court will overturn the Republican state legislature in Mississippi?
I just want to say that's not really a clarifying question, Bill, because you're not asking her to clarify something she said. You're asking to her opinion on something.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you. So next I have Marion.
Okay, there it is. When I read this, I thought to myself, I said, oh, here we go again. There is I don't think it's an undercurrent anymore. It's out there where you can see it. It's smacking us in the face. Yeah, I think it's going to be with us until the end of time. There are folks in this nation of the Caucasian persuasion that believe that when God was giving out brain cells, he didn't give as many to people of color that he gave to our brothers and sisters of the Caucasian persuasion. It's all about power and control. And these people that have taken over really believe that no person, there's not any person in this country of color who should be in charge or have any kind of power. And that's why things are going backwards. And when my granddaughter and I are having conversations, I said, there are people in this country that really would like things to be the way they were 300 or 400 years ago. So it's going to be a constant battle for people that look like me to try to stay on top of things as best you can. I wonder sometimes if when I vote, is it really making a difference? I said, but because that registrar of voters tore up my registration form 3 times in 3 weeks and was about to do it the 4th time, I said, no, I'm just going to keep on voting and trying to do things that I think might help. But I really think of all the nerve, who in the ham fat do you think you are taking over because you believe people of a certain color should not be in power or have any kind of say-so in their political lives?
Thank you. I see you, Stanton. I'll add you to the list. I've got Dee Dee next. Marla.
I read this article and it doesn't surprise me that it's in Mississippi. Okay, but The other issue with me is this is being watched and other states might follow suit or get the idea that this is really a good idea. The other question I had, which I was confused on, is if the white folks are taking control and trying to dominate Mississippi, how did a black man get elected governor or mayor or whatever he is? You know, I know there's voter suppression in the South, and you know, Mississippi is no exception on that, but still, that's nuts. They've got a white dominated state with a black governor. And I don't know how that happened.
Bill.
And he also said later on in the article, he was saying that it reminds me of apartheid in South Africa. And that's where they had, you know, the white folks in control and the black folks outnumbered them by 4-1, but they still had control. And so this is sad and this is also scary. And I understand what Marion is saying about, is my vote really doing any good? But I'll get back on the list later.
Okay. You
Not
don't want
right
me
now.
to- Not right now. Okay.
No.
Lynetta, you're next.
I read this article and I was very concerned. I know it's a power play by the Republicans to try to hold on to power, to the white folks in Mississippi to hold on to power. They've gerrymandered the voting districts in there so that they can hold on to power, because blacks are very they're not the majority, but they're the black population in Mississippi is pretty large. My thing is I don't know how the argument went, but if the prosecution and the judges are not doing their job, it's not because they're black, maybe it's just the wrong person. But they're trying to change the throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I agree with Stanton that this is scary. And Marvel, I think this is something that black women are gonna have to just do something about it. We have to stay strong. We can't lose faith. And I agree with Greer. This should have been all over the news. Why wasn't it? I have no idea, because this is scary. And Bill, I don't know. I'm gonna answer the question that you asked, Greer. I don't think it's gonna. It's probably gonna go to the Supreme Court, but I have no hope that it gets struck down. Maybe in some of those other courts between the Supreme Court and when it's filed, maybe it get overturned. But I have no faith in the Supreme Court that they would take and rule this case. What it appears to be is pure racism and a power play. They will not see that.
Mm.
Is my time up, Phyllis?
Oh,
Just about.
Okay.
thank you, Lynetta. Stanton, you're next.
Yeah, before I get started, I just want to correct something that Dee Dee was saying. The governor is a good old white boy. He is definitely a Republican, and he is a Trumpian Republican. It's the mayor of Jackson who is black, and Jackson is primarily a black city. So that's how you get a black mayor in Mississippi. But I also wanted to address something that Greer was saying earlier, and I agree. The two-party system to me is just abhorrent, but coming from a place where I grew up in California, where we tried things like, you know, a Peace and Freedom Party and the Green Party and the Black Panther Party, all these parties had marginal success and would get, you know, 2% of the vote at best during even times in which they would have reached their prominence. So we're kind of stuck in this two-party system because of money and because of power. And the other thing I wanted to say is regards to Democrats and what we don't do, and I agree that we are just poor at representing Democratic issues. When the Republicans talk about, the crime in cities and Democrat-run, governments where the 4 largest cities are run by Black mayors. There was Paul Begala on TV last night, and he was talking about, why don't we talk about the fact that a city like Bakersfield, California, where Kevin McCarthy is from, that has a Republican mayor, has a higher crime rate than some of these other larger urban cities run by Democrats. Why don't we talk about the fact that crime is up in rural America and suburban America as much as it is in urban America? So we don't know how to fight back as Democrats. We don't know how to make political points that persuade people that the country's not in the direction that people think it's going in, that there isn't this massive amount of crime and rampage that's happening just in Black-run cities. So we got to learn. That's all I can say. It's a question of figuring out how to, fight back a very wily Republican Party that, appeals to.
Thank you, Stanton. Next is Marla.
Yeah, just a couple general thoughts about things. Lately, I've been listening to some more anti-racist educators, and they're specifically calling white people to action and saying white people need to stop being surprised by things that are racist. Every time we do that, we are detracting from taking action. And that made me kind of feel like that was applicable to this specifically, the passivity of it all in as a white person witnessing this happening, but wondering what can I do to take some action. And so this, I'm considering my call to action to kind of really look into who can I call, where can I petition, what can I sign? I mean, these things are small at best, but I think they're still critical in any, initiating some type of change. And it's, the insidious slide back into fascism, right? I mean, this is all a part of it too. These little things that don't make the news that we're not paying close attention to, and very, very dangerous, but again, not surprised. So I had other thoughts. I lost them all, Saturday morning. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you. If they come back, you can get back on the list. Next is Gigi.
I find it ironic when people are always talking about crime and what needs to be done who are political. They don't live in any of the areas where this crime is going on. But they have so much to say about it. There have been so many studies on what's the source of crime, lack of opportunity, lack of education. The list goes on. You have the information, but the government chooses not to use it. If we were safe as Black people in our community, then everyone would be safe. Crime is about location and opportunity. But no one wants to deal with the problem. You have the solutions, but you choose not to use them because that's a counterpoint. You keep something going, that's a problem, then you can always use that problem to make it to where, oh, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. And at the end of the day, I'm going to say this. I don't think as a community, we have allies. Because an ally is somebody who wants to and actually does the work. If, like Marla was saying, why surprise? Why is anybody surprised of what's going on in this country? If you look at the inception of the country, you know how things were legislated against people based on race, based on culture. The information is there, but people want to turn a blind eye and act like things have changed. Things have been suppressed, but things haven't changed if you're looking at it from the standpoint of somebody African American in America. That's it.
Thank you. Do you want to get back on the list?
Yeah, I'll get back with you.
Okay, thanks. Bill, you're next and the list is open after that.
I want to follow on
Marva.
Dee Dee, Stanton's
Cindy.
comment to Dee Dee. In Mississippi, every major city in the state has a black mayor. But every statewide office is held by a white person. And that's because of extreme gerrymandering. They should never be a supermajority in the state house in Mississippi, because there's a large percentage of African Americans in the state, but they gerrymandering. And I think that the move is because citizens, the legislatures who have to temporarily reside in Jackson are concerned about the high crime rate. Quoting the article, quote, "This bill is designed to make our capital city a safer place," said Lamar, who lives more than 170 miles from Jackson. He, like every one of his GOP colleagues, is white. I don't think this would happen in another black city, black majority city in Mississippi, and in fact, it hasn't. But also, I wanted to applaud what Greer said, and Republicans are trying to change history. I see in Florida, the books have been pulled off the shelves, include the biography of Roberto Clemente, who was a very strong, he's a great baseball player, but he was a strong humanitarian. He died on a plane crash trying to help refugees. They took his biography off the shelves along with the biography of Sotomayor, Supreme Court Justice.
Do you want to get back on the list, Bill?
I'm sorry.
Do you want to get back on the list?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, next is Marva, then Cindy. And Glenn.
I'm surprised this wasn't major news stations in the evening. Mainly CBS and NBC. I know Mississippi has a black senator. He I was surprised he didn't address this issue, and the NAACP, I was surprised. Urban League, I was surprised. All these Black organizations that's well known, and no mention of them in the article. Thank you.
Thanks, Marva. Next is Cindy, then Glenn. The list is open after Glenn.
Just a brief feedback or comment. I may be one of the older ones in the group, but somebody said a little bit ago, the amount of not change. But when I look back to my childhood, North Carolina, small towns, 70 to 75 years ago, things are drastically different for me, but also for when I was a kid, there was no contact across races unless you had a housekeeper or a cook, which we didn't. The schools were totally segregated. The housing, the quote, Louise, Black towns were horrible. That's dramatically different now. I went back to that same small town a few years back. I could hardly recognize it for good reasons, because of the mixture, because of the contact. The schools were different. The people worked side by side. I don't remember that when I was a kid. Now, maybe I just didn't notice. So it really has changed a lot. The contact, the amount of contact across races is greatly increased. But then you compare it to New Orleans, where it's pretty regular. Anyway, just an observation. I think it makes a difference in how we deal with people. If we're comfortable across races and used to having, I think for me as a kid, having a Black friend was an impossibility. But that's not true anymore, fortunately. But we got a long way to go. Enough said.
Thanks, Cindy. Right on time. Next is Glenn. Oh, Bill, gotcha. Glenn, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
You know, back when we had our first African-American mayor, which was Mayor Dutch Mario, that was about 40 years ago. The state tried to impose its will on the city, take it over government that was duties of our mayor. And our mayor, and before he was a mayor, he was a lawyer. And he took him to the court. He took him to the court and won in the court. And that's what the people of Jackson should do, take them to court. And because what in this poisonous era that we are living in, they're going to abuse the law. In fact, they're going to get together and make a plan to make money with privatization of jails. With the way they don't have to worry about how they convict, because they won't have to worry about any voters. So they're going to go in a partnership with private jails to make them some money. And that's my opinion.
Thank you, Glenn. Next is Louise, then Bill and Greer.
So I'm just jumping off what Cindy said. Stanton has his finger up too.
Thank you.
And it's going to be an analogy, I'm afraid. I do love those analogies, but yes, things have slightly got better, but it's like a house, a beautiful house that you paint, and the painting has got, better and better, and the painting really does look lovely, but the structure is still exactly the same. The foundations are still exactly the same. So you can put roses around the doorway as much as you like, but it's still the same. So that's all. And and of course these politicians will get away with as much as they can until they get noticed. No one is noticing it, and they will keep going until we do something. But that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Louise. Clarifying question, Cindy? You're muted. You have to unmute.
Louise said, until we do something, what do we do? I mean, do I write to the mayor?
Okay. Well, that's not a clarifying question, but I will very quickly answer it because someone did say something. Yes, writing in, Marla, I think, suggested doing whatever we can to make our voice heard, even though it's very small and wispy. If enough people do it, then they're like, oh, okay, they're on to us. We better do, I mean, I do feel helpless, and I do understand what you're saying because yes, I feel helpless all the time. But there are little things that we can do, and I think one of the big things we can do is stop saying it's getting better and just say we need to fix what is
Absolutely.
the
The
big.
basis.
Know what I mean? Yeah,
Yes.
right, exactly.
Okay, thank you both. Next, I have Bill.
Just picking up on what Cindy said and Louise said, the GOP, there have been some changes, some of them may be superficial, but the Republicans are alarmed by these changes. They don't want to have the city court system in Jackson run by African Americans. So they changed the laws, take that away. And it's happening all over the country, trying to rewrite history, trying to disenfranchise people of color. Even I read today in Nashville, Tennessee, there's a major thoroughfare going through the middle of the town called John Lewis Way. And the Republican legislature wants to name it Donald Trump Way, which is disgusting. So, well, then, and then, yes, there have been changes, but the changes have been too much for the GOP. They're trying to do everything they can to roll back those changes and go back to the 50s. So it's a sad time, but it's one that everyone, people of all colors, should fight in any way they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, I have Greer.
Someone said it earlier. I can't remember who said it, but they said, you know, basically this is a test case because if they can get away with this, they're going to try it somewhere else. And then they're going to try it somewhere else. And that's basically how disease spreads. It hits one person, then it hits the next person, then it hits the next person. And basically, if you look at our history in this country, our existence, our ability to move, our ability to do anything as being an African American has always been monetized from cradle to grave. And that's still that way today. This is going to be tantamount to convict leasing. They're going to be able to put anybody in jail, and mainly Black people in jail, to monetize our existence. Because if you look at the prison industrial complex and how it works in terms of money being made, the state guarantees that the cells will be filled. In order to guarantee the cells get filled, you have to make sure people are convicted. So if you're setting up a group of people to actually become the people who feed bodies into that jail, then you're going to guarantee those jails are filled. Because the alternative is, if those cells aren't filled, then the state has to pay the corporation that owns the prison. So basically, they're creating basically what already exists in this city and in the state. A prison industrial complex with Black bodies being fed into it, a place where there's poor education. Because if you can't read or write, or you can't take care of yourself and you graduate high school, what's the likelihood of you getting a job to where you can support yourself at a decent wage? So it's a cycle. It's a never-ending cycle where they already know what they can do to improve things for people, but they choose not to so bodies can be fed into prison. I'm sorry I went over. That's it.
Thank you. Do you want to get back on the list?
I'll let you know.
Okay, Bill, I see you. So I've got Stanton, then Glenn, then Bill at the moment. Anybody else? Okay, Stanton.
Yeah, this is back to something that Cindy was saying about the appearance of things improving. Yeah, I think they are improving on a certain level. And yes, I think we can't compare what's happening today to what was happening 75 years ago. But I think that improvement is creating this undercurrent of white resentment. And that to me is the troubling thing, that as things are seemingly improving, the more resentful that 35% of dedicated Republican Trump voters are feeling. And that to me is the scary thing, because all it takes is a situation like Bosnia, where you have people who are already pitted against each other for years of resentment and years of attitudes and years of policies. And then it just takes one little precipitating factor for that powder keg to explode, to be cliche. And I will say this, and this is in defense of myself, it also, not only is it, towards Blacks, but it also extends to Jews and to gay people. And trust me, I am in that sort of category of being somewhat concerned about my future in this country as well, because if things take a turn for the ugly, I'm going down with the rest of y'all, is all I can say. So my whiteness don't buy me shit when it comes to people's attitudes towards gay people and Jews. So that's my point of view.
Thank you, Stanton. Next, Glenn. Glenn.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute my screen when I like to ask Stanton a question before I say my piece.
Is it a clarifying question? Did you not understand something
It
he said?
always is.
I'll judge that. Go ahead.
Stanton, you say that your whiteness don't buy you anything. How do they know you are a Jew?
I'm going to just answer that question quickly. And I tell people this all the time when they worry about being followed on social media and people tracking their personal information. My mother came from a little tiny village in what is modern day Ukraine today. They didn't have computers. They didn't have technology. They found her whole family. They killed 90% of her family. The neighbors pointed fingers and said Jews live there. And they were rounded up and taken into a center, and they were shipped off to death camps. So all it takes is somebody pointing a finger at you and saying that MF is either gay or Jewish or whatever. And there it goes right down the drain with everybody else that is not liked and is persecuted. So that's how they know. I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it did.
Thank you, Stanton. Okay, you can start your time now, Glenn.
Thanks for answering the question, Stan. I don't think we can judge if things is getting better or things are getting worse, because we only is presented to us the worst things that are happening. We know nothing about the good things, very little about the good things. So maybe the good, I believe that, in fact, I know the good is outweighing the bad. We look at at what police used to do to us and would be scot-free. Now they're being called to justice. Technology is bringing them to justice. The richest people used to get away with murder. That's changing. A president of the United States, I do believe he is going to jail. Others have gone to jail. So I don't think we have all the information on all the good things that are happening and predicting that everything is worse today than it ever been. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Glenn. Bill and then Marla, and the list is open after Marla if anybody wants to get on.
First of all, I want to say that Stanton shows that even white people can be affected by intersectionality, as we learn, because he's both gay and Jewish. It's not the same as African Americans, because if he doesn't have a Star of David on his chest, people won't necessarily know he's Jewish, but they will find out, as Stanton said about his mother and her family. Anyway, I want to agree with Glenn about the evils of private jails. They should be unconstitutional. In Mississippi, they had the convict labor system. I think it originated there. When the whites discovered they didn't have free labor anymore, decided they enacted some laws that made it easier. An apprentice couldn't leave his thing, and that triggered the Reconstruction laws. And it temporarily suspended that nonsense. But after Reconstruction was abolished, I went to the Civil Rights Museum, and ironically in Jackson, Mississippi. In the Civil Rights Museum, they had a display about the convict labor system. And in the 1880s, for the whole decade, no Black man survived his sentence. And the sentence was mostly on trumped up charges. The sheriff would come, a lumber company would come into town and say, I need 40 workers. And the sheriff would just round up 40 Black men to fill his quota and pocket the difference. Anyway, I heard my time is up. I think I made my main point.
Thank you, Bill. Marla, you're next, and the list is open after that.
Yeah, so I'm still just thinking about all of this in the context of how white people who care about things like this respond to it. And I listen to Consciously. Sometimes I can't think of his given first name, but he goes by the Consciously on Instagram. And one of the things he's talked about is how white people who have, good intent, or even more than good intent, who are maybe actively anti-racist and learning and unlearning behaviors and things like that, that we have the tendency to separate ourselves from other white people. And I'm thinking about that in the context of this, we're looking at this, and it's very easy for me to sit and say, those are other white people, they're horrible white people in Mississippi who are doing this to Black people. But those white people, that's me, that's us, that's we, the white people, we are the collective, and we are doing these things. So I really think and would agree with these folks who have said the same thing, that we have to stop separating and othering white people as doing worse things than what we are doing. We're a part of it too. And I think Black folks consistently, have been not a monolith, but a community and a collective. Like, we are Black people, but we don't do that as white people. We don't say we white people do XYZ, or we have these practices that are dangerous systemically. We say it's those terrible white people who have done terrible white supremacist things and who are creating a system of things that are awful. And we stand by and say that. That's not helping a damn thing. And then finally, I just want to say, kind of in response to some of the comments here. Oh, anyway, I'll save it for wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure thing. And Greer, you're next, and then the list, we could take one or two more people before we do wrap up. Stanton and Bill. Okay, I'm gonna close the list after Bill, and then we'll go into the wrap up. So Greer.
What we have in this country when it comes to a lot of things, and I'm going to say it worldwide, people stand by. They stand by and they watch bad things happen because it's not happening to them. People stood by with slavery and watched it happen and watched what happened to people. People stood by when the Indians were walked on the Trail of Tears. People stood by. People stood by when Jews were taken and placed into the ghetto. People stood by and knew when children were being sex trafficked by rich elites. And everybody knew, but nobody did nothing. And if you look at it in today's standard, we have social media. Everybody's standing by and filming, but nobody's doing. And this is the most dangerous thing about what's happening in Jackson. Everybody's standing by and watching, and nobody's doing. Because if it happens in Jackson, again, they're going to do it everywhere else. Animals are smart enough. If they're kept in an electrified fence, they're going to test that fence to find a weakness to where they can get out. And that's the same thing they're doing here. They're finding our weakness for us just to stand by and let it happen. And when it does, they know we're going to let it happen again, again, and again. That's it.
Thank you. Greer. Stanton, you're next.
Yeah, I want to address 2 points that were made. I'm going to respectfully disagree with Marla. I don't believe in collective guilt. I mean, I would just say this outright. I, for one, do not hate all Germans because they are Germans. I think that there are people who are responsible for their individual acts. There may be groups of people within the group who are responsible, but I don't believe in collective guilt and collective responsibility in that regard, to just say it's all white people. It's not all white people. I'm going to say this, and you may disagree. I believe it is some white people. And then to address what Greer just said, I couldn't agree more. I have said to my own mother many times when she would complain about how nobody did anything for my people, that people watched and stood by. I said, well, what do you know about the Uyghurs? What do you know about the Rohingya? What do you know about all these other persecuted and oppressed minority groups throughout the world? Are you doing anything? And she looks at me sheepishly, and it's maybe not a nice thing to do to one's old Holocaust surviving mother. But I explained to her, when you're in your own home and it's comfortable, it's hard to necessarily put yourself in the shoes of those people who are being oppressed and suffering. And so we all have that in us. And I think that's human nature. And I mean, I don't want to kick myself too hard for also not necessarily doing more than I do, but that's just, unfortunately, when it isn't your that's getting gored or whatever the cliche is, it's just not as painful. So yeah, I mean, it's a bad world out there in many respects. And on a last note, Glenn, I really do appreciate your optimism on many levels and all the things that you say in counter to some of the stuff that everybody sees as so negative and so oppressive. And I do, you're a breath of fresh air for me, Glenn. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanton. Bill, you're the final speaker.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to talk so much, but as usual, what people said triggered thoughts I had. I wanted to finish the thing about the convict labor system in Mississippi. I ran out of time. The convict labor system was worse than slavery in many ways, because slavery, the black slave was a valuable commodity. So they wanted to keep, the slave masters wanted to keep in good health so they could sell them for a good price. But there's no value to keeping the convicts alive under the convict labor system. So they just worked them to death. That's why no one survived in the 1880s. They figured that black lives didn't matter. And also want to pick up on another thread that Marla said and Stanton said. I don't feel collective guilt, but I do feel collective responsibility to try to correct the evils that were done by my ancestors and other white people. And as an example, I'm not trying to say this because we did an extraordinary good thing, but I wanted to, when George Floyd died, our neighborhood at Oak and Carrollton at 6 o'clock every evening had a 9-minute kneel down in support of George Floyd. And we carried signs, and I had a sign that said Black Lives Matter. But Cindy had a more important sign. Her sign said, silence is deadly. And we have to speak up. Now, holding the Black Lives Matter event in Rawlins Parish is not an act of courage. Holding it in a small town, a white town in Mississippi would be an act of courage. But anyway, we did it.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate everybody's comments during the discussion. Now we'll go into the wrap up, and I believe everyone has spoken at least once during this meeting, which is very rare. So everybody will just have 1 minute for the wrap up, and I'll call on you as I see you on the screen. Dee Dee.
It occurred to me with this article that it's, they're calling it a Republican, a Democrat move. Okay. They're calling the people in Mississippi the Republicans that are doing this. I think it goes farther and deeper than that. This to me is past a control issue. This is a humanitarian issue. And I was raised that every person is taken individually, not a group of people. And so this, for me, is a horrid situation to treat other human beings like that. I am so done.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Stanton, you're next. And you made it through the whole thing. Yay.
Yeah, I'm going to pass because I've said enough today, but thank you, everybody, and good to see y'all.
Thank you. Bill?
I think I've said enough so far. It is a great article. Thank Nancy for the article. And it prompted a good discussion. As I said more than I intended to, but
Yeah, I'll tell her she can watch the YouTube video and see how it went.
People's comments triggered thoughts of mine.
Thank you. Louise?
Bill, you probably made it through because of all that cough medicine you were down in during the conversation. But yeah, not much more to say. I mean, I like the idea, Bill, of responsibility instead of guilt, and Marla, I also think, back to your point of, feeling helpless, let's do something and write to people. So if you get contacts, or if I get contacts, I really think we should share them with our group here, and we should all mass produce letters and send them for what it's worth. It's an actual physical thing that we're doing instead of just wanting stuff to happen. Anyway, great seeing you all.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks for being the timekeeper. Cindy,
No
you're
problema.
next.
The idea of sending letters, I think each of us is smart enough to write one strong letter about the situation. Who to send it to is the tricky thing. I'd like to get the names, so maybe several of us could try to go back and I'll find the article that I had this morning early and see if it has more detail of some of those Republican names and who to write it to, who to send it to multiple times. So maybe we can do that. But let's put the names or any addresses that we get for this on the website or wherever.
Well, email them.
Email.
Mhm.
Email who? The group?
The group.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Marion?
Oh, oops.
I appreciated everyone's comments. I really appreciated us having this discussion today. Cindy, I'm one of these persons that writes letters to the editor. They don't always get published, but I'm not doing that. I'm just exercising my freedom of speech right. So I do appreciate us meeting every Saturday and having these discussions. And it somewhat gives me hope rather, when I see you all spread across the screen. And I know that there are many more people that might not be participating in this Zoom discussion that have similar attitudes about wanting to treat people, fellow human beings fairly. So this was a good conversation and I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Marion. Marva?
I agree with all of you. Suggestion of communicating with organizations that would fight for the against discrimination. I would suggest that next board meeting, we try and construct a letter and send it out to NAACP, Urban League, because I know those organizations exist in Mississippi. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Marla?
Yep, nothing more to add. I just really appreciate all these discussions and look forward to them every week. So have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. Lynetta?
A good article that Nancy picked out, and I just see that there's a lot of work that Black women as a whole have to do in this country. We are capable, and this is just something else that's added to the list that we need to do. And I agree that this two-party system is not working. I think the answer is with Black women becoming politically active and doing something about these particular problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynetta. Glenn?
Stand for that cop.
You're breaking up a little bit, Glenn. It's hard to hear you.
I hope that, can you hear me good now?
That's much
Yeah.
better. Mhm.
All right. I hope the rest of y'all heard what Stanton said about me, and some of y'all make them kind of compliments. And what Louise going having a fit over there? Look,
No,
Yeah.
it's just we all love you, Glenn. Just get over yourself.
Okay, point of order, point of order.
Sorry,
That's
sorry.
okay. Go ahead,
All
Glenn.
right. All right. Well, yeah, I enjoyed the meeting and look forward to next week.
Well, I'm facilitating, so don't hold your breath on that.
And you had plenty more time there, Glenn.
Well, he's done. Gigi, your final wrapper.
I hope that we, as a society of people that are supposed to care about each other, wake up. At least those who do care about society as a whole being safe and everything that good that it could be. Because at the end of the day, if you're that person that they're singling out or that group of people, either help is going to come too late or help isn't coming. But remember, you may be next. That's it.
Thank you, Greer, and thank you, everyone. I don't really have a lot of final wrap-up thoughts. I do think this was a good discussion with a lot of different angles and takes, and that everybody contributed to quite well. I appreciate that. I'm sure Nancy will. When I get it all uploaded on YouTube, I'll just send her the link in her email. And I will stop the recording.